Hello, YouTubers and NFL fans everywhere. This is Matt, the NFL Fanatic, giving you my Week 17, 2025 NFL predictions. Well, for the Fanatic this week, it was another good positive week in terms of both my against the spread and straight up predictions. I'm always happy about that. I was a little disappointed that I ended up going. I had a 9-6 record going into the Monday night game between the Niners and the Colts, and I stupidly decided to take the Colts plus 5.5. I think I was just a little too overconvinced about how well they were doing, and they ended up losing by 21 points. And the Niners have probably one of their most complete games the entire year, especially in that second half. So, but going against the spread and straight up both having winning records, again, I will greatly take that. But so far, against the spread and straight up from last week, I went 9-7 again against the spread, so I get another 2 games. And straight up, I went 11-5. So, again, continuing to make progress. Again, with 2 weeks to go, I don't think I'll be able to overcome a 12-game gap. That would be incredible to do that, but I do not think that will be possible. But I will take the winning record. So against the spread, I went 9-7, straight up 11-5. That equals 56.3% against the spread and 68.8% straight up. So I will gladly take that. And through 240 games, and it's amazing, we're at the final 32. So far this year, through 240 games, I am 112, 124, and 4 against the spread. And straight up now, I am 155, 84, and 1. So that equals up to 47.5% against the spread. Straight up, I am now 64.8%, so 65 if you want to round. So I'm doing about yearly average. That's a little disappointing. Over the last couple years, I've been doing better with my straight up predictions. And my against the spread predictions, where I had a good year where I got above 500. I'm kind of going around maybe a little bit slightly above average that I've done these spread picks over the years. I did want to say also very quickly for everybody out there, doing a couple quick things before going to my predictions. I do want to say I want to wish everybody out there a happy holiday and a Merry Christmas to everyone that is celebrating tomorrow and on Friday. For every Canadian out there as well, I want to wish all the Canadians out there that are watching, especially Gio and Bridgewater's Finest, a happy Boxing Day for all the Canadians out there as well. And I also did want to say that with my work schedule, my plan for the next week of the final week of the regular season and the first week of the playoffs, because I know my work schedule, I will be doing full videos on those Mondays. So, good news, everybody that likes having my long-form videos. Those will be coming out this coming Monday and the following Monday for Week 18 and the wild card round. So, but again, we are wrapping up the significant part of the NFL season. We basically know a majority in the AFC of spots: New England, Buffalo, Jacksonville, Denver, the Chargers have all clinched spots. So 5 of the 7 playoff teams have clinched spots. The only 2 that are possibly in the air are the Texans and the Colts, and the Steelers and the Ravens. Though I would tell everybody, if you're going to be a betting person, put money on the Steelers and the Texans to clinch their playoff spots through a combination of variety of things. Where in the NFC, you basically know now that the entire NFC West has captured 3 of the 7 spots, and the Bears have also clinched a spot, and the Eagles have won the NFC East. Really, the only spot that you have to think about that is up for grabs, in my opinion, is the NFC South, which to me is one of the more surprising stories of how kind of the rise and fall of the Panthers have gone on. And that will probably come down to Week 18 in the Carolina and Tampa Bay game to end the year. And I would make an argument to you that could be the 272nd game played in the last spot, because they don't know the scheduling. I would tell you, though, the other 2 games to look out for that final 272nd spot to me would be Seahawks at 49ers. Depending on how this week goes, that could be for the 1 seed, or Broncos or Chargers at Broncos, because depending on how things go, that could be for the 1 seed as well. And it is kind of crazy how this season's gone on, because we basically now know that essentially we're going in, the NFC pretty much it's set. And I think, again, the Bears have been a fantastic story throughout this year. They've had 6 fourth quarter comebacks in this season, which again ties, or I believe breaks an NFL record for the years. That's incredibly impressive. But, the Bears have been a great surprise. The Eagles winning the NFC East through their ups and downs. I still think that they're still a very good, solid team. And they are the defending champs that have the experience. And Jalen, Saquon, you get Lane Johnson back. You get Jalen Carter back. Like, this team will have the experience and maybe will kind of round into a good form going into the postseason. The Rams are a fantastic team. I think the Rams have been the best team on paper, on result, through numbers, throughout the entire year. I would just say that the only problems I would say for Rams fans should be the secondary and these awful collapses, primarily the Eagles game on the road and the Seahawks game on the road. The Rams should clearly be the one seed in the NFC, but they are not due to those flaws. So I would just say those are things I would say for the Rams. The Niners have been an incredible story. Kyle Shanahan, who, if you've watched my videos over the years, you know I'm not the biggest fan of, but the Niners clearly to me have the coach of the year for what he's had to go through. I get the schedule argument, but you only can play the people you can play. And you're telling me the Niners, who went from 6-11 or 5-12 last year to an 11-win football team this year back in the playoffs, knowing everything that's going on with Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Mikael Williams, George Kittle, Brock Purdy, Mac Jones, Brandon Ayuk not being there the entire year due to injury and now the contract problem. That's an incredible thing for the Niners. And then I talked about Bucks Panthers. And in the AFC, the crazy story in the AFC is it's the first time, and they had the stat out since 1998. And you said it's a little bit flawed, but no Peyton Manning, no Tom Brady, no Big Ben, and then no Patrick Mahomes. So for the first time, the AFC is pretty much wide open to where you basically have a segment of the debate in the AFC is, do you take the teams or do you take Josh Allen, because he's probably going to be the best quarterback that's going to be left in the playoffs? And I would tell you I'd take the teams. I do not think the Buffalo Bills, even though I had them, from the beginning of the year. So there is a bit of me selfishly that is going to be rooting for the Bills to be right from the beginning of the year, that even though they are playing each other this weekend, that we will see this matchup in Super Bowl 60 in a couple months. I do not expect the Bills to represent the AFC because of the rest of the team and how that's gone. And again, you have Jacksonville in there. What a story for them. Trevor Lawrence playing MVP football, playing one of the best games against the number one defense in the NFL, and clearly outplaying the Broncos. The Pats rise, tripling their wins, and Drake May looking like the franchise quarterback, and to me, probably the best guy since Brady, and maybe the second best guy they will ever have in that franchise, at least for this year. Houston's turnaround, to where they started out 1-5, and then they were able to kind of string together wins. They were able to get healthier. Their defense has been outstanding, and I think Houston is a dark horse in the AFC because they are the counterculture to the league. To where, again, you could say they have a defense that basically their pressure is their defense, because all they need to know is, and they have a Ravens, Bucks, style defense, to where they don't need a lot of points for them to hold on, and just especially against this group of young, inexperienced playoff quarterbacks for the most part, or Josh Allen we saw in Week 8 on Thursday Night Football. The Texans are a legitimate force and a legitimate contender to surprise a lot of people in the AFC, even if they don't win the South this year. So those are my kind of thoughts, and I'll talk about the rest of the teams as I go through my picks, but let me get into my predictions. So on Thursday, tomorrow, Christmas Day, what a popcorn fart for the NFL, where they thought they had these massive matchups in the NFL, and they looked at them and they said that these games essentially are going to mean nothing in the grand scheme of things at all. So, but on Thursday, Christmas Day, and even though I will tell you this, I still think the NFL games, just because it's the NFL games, even with Netflix, will outdo the NBA schedule, even though the NBA is putting up solid games for the most part tomorrow, as they always do on Christmas Day. But on Christmas Day tomorrow, when the 6-8-1 Dallas Cowboys go to Washington to take on the 4-11 Washington Commanders, the Dallas Cowboys are 7-point favorites in this game. Give me Dallas here, -7, and Dallas straight up. Then the next game, when the 8-7 Detroit Lions go to Minnesota to take on the 6-9 Minnesota Vikings, the Detroit Lions are 7.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Detroit here, -7.5, and Detroit straight up. Then the next game on Prime on the end Christmas night, in a sad way, when the 11-3, when the 12-3 Denver Broncos go to Kansas City to take on the 6-9 Kansas City Chiefs. The Denver Broncos are 13.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Denver here minus 13.5 and Denver straight up. Then on Saturday, and probably the biggest, or the two more interesting games of the weekend, when the 10-5 Houston Texans travel to Los Angeles to take on the 11-4 Los Angeles Chargers. This, to me, is probably the best game of the entire weekend. The Los Angeles Chargers are 2-point favorites, and a slight upset here. I'm going to take Houston +2 and Houston straight up. And then on the Saturday night Peacock game, when the 7-8 Baltimore Ravens go to Green Bay to take on the 9-5-1 Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers are 3-point favorites in this game. I'm going to take Green Bay here -3 and Green Bay straight up. And then on Sunday, in a lot of meaningless football games now due to the scheduling, but on Sunday, when the 3-12 Arizona Cardinals travel to Cincinnati to take on the 6-9 Cincinnati Bengals, or the 5-10, the 5-10 Cincinnati Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals are 7-point favorites in this game. Give me Cincinnati here -7 and Cincinnati straight up. Then the next game, when the 9-6 Pittsburgh Steelers travel to Cleveland to take on the 3-12 Cleveland Browns. The Pittsburgh Steelers are 3-point favorites in this game because of the big news coming out of Pittsburgh, where wide receiver DK Metcalf has been suspended the final 2 regular season games due to a fan interaction and him shoving a Detroit fan for 2 sides of the story of what was said. DK said that the fan said offensive things to him and about his mom. The fan said he called him by his government name. I'll let fans and you have those opinions, but he is out the final 2 games, which means his $45 million in fully guaranteed salary is also voided. But with that being said, I'm going to take Pittsburgh here to win straight up, even with DK out, but I'm going to take the Cleveland Browns +3. And then the next game, when the 5-10 New Orleans Saints go to Tennessee to take on the 3-12 Tennessee Titans. The New Orleans Saints are 2.5-point favorites in this game. Give me New Orleans here, -2.5, and New Orleans straight up. Then the next game, when the 11-4 Jacksonville Jaguars travel to Indianapolis, take on the 8-7 Indianapolis Colts. The Jacksonville Jaguars are 6.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Jacksonville here, -6.5, and Jacksonville straight up. Then the next game, when the 7-8 Tampa Bay Buccaneers go to Miami to take on the 6-9 Miami Dolphins. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 5.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Tampa Bay here, -5.5, and Tampa Bay straight up. Then the next game, when the 12-3 New England Patriots go to New York to take on the 3-12 New York Jets. The New England Patriots are 13.5-point favorites in this game. Give me New England here, -13.5, and New England straight up. Then the next game, when the 12-3 Seattle Seahawks go to Carolina to take on the 8-7 Carolina Panthers. The Seattle Seahawks are 7-point favorites in this game. Give me Seattle here, -7, and Seattle straight up. Then the next game, in the ultimate, and I am genuinely telling people this, the third most important game of the weekend. In my opinion, the 3 biggest games of the weekend are Bears-Niners, Eagles at Bills, that's 2. Giants-Raiders is the third most important game of the entire weekend because it's essentially the battle for the one where the winner is the loser. When the 2-13 New York Giants go to Las Vegas, they're going to be 2-13 Las Vegas Raiders. The Las Vegas Raiders are 1.5-point favorites in this game, and I did hear, as I'm recording this video, about the Brock Bowers news. Even with that, I'm going to take the Las Vegas Raiders here, -1.5, and Las Vegas straight up. Then the next game, when the 10-5 Philadelphia Eagles go to Buffalo to take on the 11-4 Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills are 1-point favorites in this game. This game is essentially a pick'em. And a slight upset here, I'm going to take Philadelphia here, +1, and Philadelphia straight up. Then the next game, and again, this is a huge game for both the Bears for winning the division and for the Niners in attempting to acquire the number 1 seed. When the 11-4 Chicago Bears go to San Francisco to take on the 11-4 San Francisco 49ers. The San Francisco 49ers are 3-point favorites in this game. Give me Chicago here, my biggest upset of the week. Chicago here, +3, and Chicago straight up. Then the next game, when the 11-4 Los Angeles Rams go to Atlanta to take on the 6-9 Atlanta Falcons. The Los Angeles Rams are 8-point favorites in this game. Give me Los Angeles here, -8 and Los Angeles straight up. All right, it's time for my quick thoughts on each game. The first three here, Dallas and Washington. Look, the Cowboys and Commanders have been just a incredible disappointment for the most point overall. Their defense has been pathetic. It looks like it's aged miserably. Terry McLaurin hasn't been able to really stay healthy for most of the year. Jaden Daniels hasn't been really able to stay healthy most of the year. He's had about 3 or 4 different injuries. The Commanders today announced that even Marcus Mariota could not play this game, so it's going to be Josh Johnson starting his first game since 2021. And I think just because of that, and the Cowboys, the Cowboys, to me, have been very 2024 Bengals-esque. To where, the Cowboys defense was so hyped up after, they get Quinnen Williams, they get Logan Wilson, they beat the tar out of the Raiders, and then they beat the Eagles and Chiefs in back-to-back games, and they're all hyped up because they beat the Super Bowl participants from last year. And then they go on and proceed to have miserable games against the Lions, where Jahmyr Gibbs ran all over them, and then against the Vikings, where J.J. McCarthy outplayed Dak Prescott in a shootout, and then once they realized that their entire season was over, they couldn't even have a false sense of security, and they get rolled by the Chargers, where the Chargers, offense was just having their way. Justin Herbert had 300 yards and 2+ touchdown. Amarion Hampton scored. Quinn Johnson had big plays. And it was so bad, they pulled Dak in the final 5 minutes for Joe Milton to play a lot of meaningless football. So, and I just want to say this. Dak Prescott is he's an average quarterback. He's not an elite quarterback, guys. The Cowboys, if they were smart, would trade Dak Prescott. Because Dak's not that great. At some point, Dak Prescott, with his 2 playoff wins, and the last 2 years, they haven't made the playoffs with his $60 million per year salary. I'm just telling people, the Dak is not going to be that guy. But in this game, I think the Cowboys offense, with the way they've been playing, Josh Johnson's been a career veteran. I don't think he look terrible. I think the Cowboys just kind of go up and down the field on that offense. If you have any of those guys in fantasy, play them. If you're playing in your fantasy playoff championship, this is going to be very fun for those Cowboys offensive players. And I just think for the Commanders, with how bad that defense has been, and with just how decimated they look, I feel like the Cowboys will win this shootout fairly easily. You could argue for the Cowboys is the worst thing to do because they're winning meaningless games. The only funny thing the Cowboys season could look forward to is an 8-1 record. But I think with the Cowboys, with their offensive weapons, with their talent, and just the Commanders, in their position with the lack of weapons they have, the Cowboys should be able to outshoot the Commanders in a fairly easy game, with the Cowboys at least attempting to still try to play throughout the rest of the year. So that's Dallas here -7 and Dallas straight up. The next game, Detroit over Minnesota. This one is where, look, the Vikings, over the last few weeks, they've played more consistent football. The defense has played fairly well to an extent. They were able to get pressure. JJ was coming off 2 great games by his standards, where he clearly outplayed Jaden Daniels and Mariota, and then outshot Dak Prescott in a 34-26 game. That was probably the best back-to-back game stretch I've seen JJ McCarthy play the whole year. But then if you watch the Giants game on Sunday, he looked completely lost, inept. He had 2 terrible turnovers. You could argue Brian O'Neill calls the one where Brian Burns just literally ran by him. But it's a sad moment because I just think the issue for J.J. McCarthy is the man is a glass ballerina. He's a glass figure. The man just cannot stay healthy. The man's had multiple injuries. He tore his meniscus in the preseason last year, and if the Vikings are genuinely serious about trying to continue to compete, they need to think about getting another veteran quarterback or possibly moving on from J.J. McCarthy. Because to be fair, besides those couple games, J.J.'s shown a lot more bad tape than good. And I just think with this injury, it's if you're going to need to have a reliable, competent, and maybe even better backup at all times, that's not a franchise quarterback. And J.J. just throughout this year, through his play up and down, just continually show you he's not that guy. And honestly, and I know it's a hairline fracture, and you could say, oh, he could try to tape it up or stuff like that. Justin Herbert's playing with a broken non-throwing hand. But I look at the Vikings and say, look, it's bad where, the Vikings have been out for the last, 2 weeks. They have nothing to play for. And like I've said before in my longer videos, Kevin O'Connell needs to be gone. This was an absolute failure. And if you watch that Vikings offense, Max Brosmer, okay, and this is the quarterback guru here, right? If you watch Max Brosmer against Seattle, he looked like trash. And if it wasn't for the Giants' ineptitude with Jackson Dart throwing a grand total of 33 yards, what's Kevin O'Connell doing? I thought he was this quarterback genius. Kevin O'Connell sucks at his job. Come on now. He's not going to get fired because they're going to give him a pass. But I really think for how bad the Vikings will underachieve this year, he should, because that was the whole expectation. And seeing what Sam Darnold is doing in Seattle with Clint Kubiak, with kind of competent talent, that's really telling you in a way they made a mistake. But, and then the Lions, look, the Lions have been very good for the most part. And it's unfortunate that they probably could have a 10-win season or a winning record and miss the playoffs. Because I think that offense, which leads the league in 30-plus point games, but just the defense, and Dan Campbell on Sunday really cost them the game by not going for the field goal there at the end of in the beginning of the game to tie it. And look, Dan, he's always been uber aggressive, hyper aggressive, and he will die on that sword. And look, he's not going to get fired, but next year, because of how disappointing this year was, looking at how that defense has played, even with the Kelvin Shepard difference, and they got the running game for Pittsburgh just smoked them consistently. Jalen Warren had his best game in about 3 years, and he also had 2 big 45-yard touchdowns that sealed the game. And I just think for the Lions, this is a game where, again, they should win. They're mad about what happened back in Week 3 where JJ got his second career win, where they won 24-21. I think this is Max Brosmer. I think the Lions need to go into this game going, at the end of the day, Dan Campbell's going to motivate his guys to play until the very last second where they're officially eliminated. And the good news is the Packers played on Saturday, so you can still motivate them. And I think the Vikings defense, they can get after Jared Goff. They got the Jared Goff in their first meeting this year. But I'm going to take the Lions. They're healthier. Amon-Ra should play. And I just think after the performance of Max Brosmer in the 2 games that he's played, I just don't think that he'll be able to play as well and get this win in this situation. So that's why Detroit are -7.5 and Detroit straight up. Denver over Kansas City. The Chiefs have amazingly gone through over the last 2 weeks 2 quarterbacks that have suffered significant knee injuries. Patrick Mahomes tore his ACL, as everybody knows, a couple weeks ago. Thankfully for Gardner Minshew, he suffered a contusion where his ACL is still intact, but he's probably going to be out for the game. So if you're going with Chris Oludewan, the third-string quarterback at home, I just think against Denver, who's mad and ticked off, and they knew that last year they should have beat them in Kansas City. I think Denver should be able to roll them fairly easily. When Chris came in the game, he tried, but they couldn't really move the ball. The Titans were just fundamentally better in every which way. And I just think with Denver, as mad as they are, they don't have the pressure of the streak anymore. They can kind of win. They do have the pressure of the 1 seed. And I just think, again, Denver, knowing what they are, knowing kind of how short the week is, knowing how the talent they have, and Bonex playing the way he is with that defense, I think you should go into Kansas City and just give the Chiefs a horrible, miserable Christmas night. Again, I feel terrible for the NFL because these 3 games that they thought on paper could have significant matter just because of branding and opportunity. These all turn into bad popcorn duds. But I would tell you, I still think, like I said, they're going to have better ratings, even with these 3 terrible games on Netflix and Prime. They're not even on cable or television. They're going to have better ratings overall or views compared to the NBA games. And that's sad, but that's how I just feel. But that's Denver here -13.5 and Denver straight up. The next game on Saturday, the Houston Texans over the Los Angeles Chargers. This game is very interesting to me. This is going to be the first game that I'll give kind of more of a genuine analysis of the game, because I just feel like with where these teams are and the matchups, the current states they're in, the first 3 didn't really need that much explanation. Just because, if you follow football or follow my channel, everybody knows what's going on. This one, though, Texans and Chargers, this comes down to me to where I'm going to go with the better defense. And to me, that's the Houston Texans. Again, the Texans through this, 7-8 game winning streak have basically been lights out defensively. They are the number one defense overall in the NFL in yards, points, and the offense just does well enough that they can, score. I did not think Woody Marks, to be fair, was going to have that much of an impact on the game there, but it did because they really couldn't run the ball. And amazingly, I remember last week, I thought one of the easier bets of the week after what we saw from the week before, where the Raiders quit against the Eagles and the Texans dominated the Cardinals. I thought the Texans were gonna, be able to shut out the Raiders and have like back-to-back shutouts put on them. But Geno and the Raiders played well enough, and if it really wasn't for the Geno interception, where I think he's tied with 2 in the league, or now he leads the league in interceptions. The Texans lose that game because that was a defensive score, and if it was the offense scores, the Raiders won 21-16. I was stunned that Ashton Genty had his best game of the year at 180 plus yards. But I think, when you look at the Texans and Chargers, I think the biggest difference to me is that, like, the Houston Texans, if I had to trust the defensive line, I'll trust the Houston defensive line to get after Justin Herbert, who has been the most pressure quarterback in the NFL the entire year. And I just think that the last time he played the Texans, he threw 4 interceptions with a healthier team, with Rashawn Slater, with Joe Alt in those games, which is huge. So I think when you look at this game, I think Justin Herbert's been playing better for the most part than Stroud. Stroud has played good football, but you seem like he's kind of just riding and maintaining the ship. Because remember, think about Davis Mills went 3-0 when CJ went out with a concussion. So CJ's not playing terrible, but CJ's kind of just coasting along. Where Justin Herbert, to be fair, but going into the Cowboy game, he was coming off 2 games where he played pretty bad football, just due to the pressure and how bad that offensive line is. And Justin Herbert has his best game in about a month against the Cowboys. I don't think he is going to play as bad as he did against the first time against the Texans. I just feel like if you're telling me what team do I have to trust, if you're going into the Charger Stadium, which everybody knows they don't have any home field advantage, neither do the Rams for the most part. I think the Texans, with that defense, with CJ's ability and just D'Amico's ability to scheme a defense, and just the constant pressure that he'll be under from the Texans defense, I think the Texans grind out a win over the Chargers in this game. If the Chargers can control the game and Herbert can make, a few more throws, or if it's going to come down to a quarterback battle where it's going to be Herbert and Stroud in a shootout, I think the Chargers win the game. I don't think it's going to come down to that, but I will say the Chargers do have an opportunity to win the game because of that. So, but again, this is going to be a very good game, and it's huge for the Texans because if they win, they will get into the playoffs. So, but that's why I like Houston here +2 and Houston Texans straight up. Then the next game, the Green Bay Packers over the Baltimore Ravens. This game comes down to where the Ravens and Packers are kind of in weird spots. To where this game really, because the Lions screwed up on Sunday in a bunch of their decisions, this should be a big game in terms of the sense that where, like, you could have had a playoff spot or playoff hopes die regardless of what happens for either team. But since the Lions lost to the Packers, they still have a 1.5 lead for the 7th seed in the playoffs right now. So even if the Packers lose this game to the Ravens, which I don't think they will, even though, again, Jordan Love went down and he went to the concussion protocol. Apparently he was limited in practice yesterday. I haven't seen any report for him today. But I think the Packers, with the way they've played, I just think they'll be able to grind out a win and more confidence because I just think, look, the Ravens, they have barely any hope. The only hope that the Ravens have is they have to win out against the Packers and the Steelers, and they have to hope Pittsburgh loses to Cleveland, which with the DK news, that was big. But again, I think Aaron Rodgers has played well. But the reason why I'm going with the Packers is I think if you take out Lamar, you take out Jordan Love, or Jordan Love gets healthy, and Lamar, who didn't practice today, I think the Jordan Love-led Packers beat the Ravens. I think the Ravens have just been dysfunctional. They can't really defensively get stops when they need to. They quit giving Derrick Henry the football. He scores a touchdown about 12 minutes left in the game, and then we don't give him the ball the rest of the game. Which is absurd because Lamar Jackson went down. Like, you would think, Tyler Huntley's not a terrible quarterback. Look, he basically saved our season when he played the game against the Bears. So I understand what Tyler Huntley, does. But I just think for, like, the Ravens and Packers, the Packers at least know they're still playing for something, and they have hope because they basically can, even eat this game if they lose. But I just think going to Lambeau on a cold night, Lamar Jackson hasn't really fared that well in the cold at all, and I don't think he's going to play. I just think the Packers and Malik Willis, what he showed in that Bears game, what he's shown in his limited opportunities as the Packers quarterback, if he can play or not, I just think he'll be able to outplay Huntley in a pretty consistent basis. I think Malik's a little bit, he's younger, he's more mobile, and I trust the Packers with where they are team-wise than where the Ravens are right now. Could the Ravens win the game with Tyler Huntley? Sure. If they, if Derrick Henry goes wild, if they can't generate a pass rush, if Lamar somehow is healthy and can play, maybe the Ravens could win the game. But I just think with what I've read and what I've seen for both these teams and the current situations they're in, I'll take the Packers. They're at home. Their defense is still pretty dominant. Their defense is still pretty good. The pass rush thing will be a problem because they really couldn't get to Caleb Williams on Saturday, which was a bit of a note. But I'll take the Packers. They're at home. They have more to play for. They're healthier to an extent, and I just feel like they have a better vibe and confidence than what the Ravens do right now. So that's why Green Bay here -3 and Green Bay straight up. The next game, the Cincinnati Bengals over the Arizona Cardinals. This one comes down to the Cardinals have just been a hard luck team. They've won 3 games, but if you look at every one of the games that they've played, maybe besides the Texan game or over the last couple weeks, they got blown up by the Texans, they got blown up by the Rams, but they're not on those levels. But the Cardinals, for the most part this year, have just basically been in these close, competitive games that their quarterback just ends up making a mistake or they can't get the play that they need when they need it. And when I look at the Cardinals, their defense is. It took a big hit yesterday or on Sunday where one of their corners and Walter Nolan, and I feel sorry that I can't think of the corner's name right now off the top of my head, but the Cardinals are just banged up defensively, and I just think the Bengals, T and Jamar are healthy, and it just feels like with Joe Burrow, it's okay, just like with the Dolphin game, it doesn't mean anything, and you could argue the Bengals are hurting themselves by having Joe Burrow play out there in meaningless games, but he wants to play and win, and I just think, again, the Bengals at home with Joe Burrow, he wants to get redemption for what happened a couple weeks ago when he played Baltimore at home, and I just think the Bengals are just healthier with Joe Burrow. And it's if you look at both teams, both defenses aren't great. Both defenses can have opportunities, and where Jacoby can try to make plays with McBride and Harrison. You got Jamar and T, which are better weapons. Gesicki's a good weapon. And I think Joe Burrow will win in the shootout against Jacoby more often than not. So, do I think the Cardinals can compete? Sure. Like I said, the Cardinals have basically been competitive in most of their games all year. But at the end of the day, the Cardinals, are still the Cardinals. And one of the crazy stats I found out if you watch the game, which is crazy to me, they have only made the playoffs 11 times, I believe, in their franchise existence. Which is crazy. Think about how bad of a franchise you have to be that over a 105-year span, you only make the playoffs 11 times over those 105 years. So, but that's why, in this game again, could Arizona be competitive? Sure. I think the Bengals defense isn't great. They really haven't had a pass rush, and Marvin and Trey and Michael Wilson can make plays on the offense. But if you're going to tell me in a shootout, who am I going to take, Joe Burrow or Jacoby Brissett? I'll take Joe Burrow to win this shootout 10 times out of 10 and twice on Sundays. So that's why Cincinnati are -7 and Cincinnati straight up. The next game, the Pittsburgh Steelers over the Cleveland Browns. This one comes down to me to where I just can't trust the Browns right now. The Browns and Shador, look, I've watched Shador play over the last, several weeks since he's been the starter. What I would tell every Browns fan, if any do, or all Browns fans that watch my videos, I would say Shador has played okay, but I've been following Cleveland media pretty well, and they have said that Deshaun Watson is an option. And I would actually tell people that is not a terrible thing for the Browns to consider. And at this point, from what I've seen out of Shedeur, I would tell people that Deshaun Watson will be in an active quarterback competition with Shedeur and with Dylan Gabriel, even though I don't think Dylan Gabriel should get cut. And I think his girlfriend is the main reason for it. But that's it. If anybody has questions about it, I can talk about that later. But the Browns, like, you need to have Deshaun Watson because they're saying that he's going to be on the active roster. You need to have Deshaun Watson compete with Shedeur Sanders into the 2026 season. Because I just haven't seen enough from Shedeur. And if you watch the game against the Bills, he had a great first drive. You know, he was able to make a few plays. But the biggest problem that I would tell people, if you watch that game, was his awareness and clock management situations were awful. Because he just took sacks in the worst times, in the worst positions. And I just think, again, like that's a huge detriment. And look, Pittsburgh and Mike Tomlin, the cockroach of the NFL, the one that, they've been there for 21 years, 21 consecutive winning seasons, 19 by Mike Tomlin. It's an incredible feat in reality, but it's the most annoying thing in the sport because the Pittsburgh Steelers just constantly can never rebuild. They will always have Mike Tomlin lifting their carcasses up to a winning record at the bare minimum or a playoff appearance of a one and done. And again, it's like, Aaron's played well. Has he played better than Russ and Fields? To a slight extent, I would say about 15 to 20%, yes. But if you really look at their numbers, I don't think it's been that different. The offense can be horrible at times. The offensive line's been terrible. Their defensive line's been ravaged by injuries. TJ Watt's been out, obviously, as people know, with a collapse along over the last few weeks. But it's just amazing watching the Pittsburgh Steelers and seeing Mike Tomlin constantly do this. And look, and the reason why I'm going with Pittsburgh is I just don't think Cleveland's in a good spot. Their offensive line's been banged up. They don't, Quinnion Junkins obviously had a terrible leg injury. I don't want to, if everybody watches, you don't need to see that. And I wish him the best of luck with health-wise. But the Steelers, I just think will kind of grind out and win against the Browns even without DK. Like, DK, made one catch. But to be fair, Pittsburgh going into Cleveland, Pittsburgh's won 20 or 21 straight games in Pittsburgh. When they've gone into Cleveland, that is a bit of a different story, where that's been a bit more of a mixed bag. So I would tell Steeler fans, like, I'm going to take you guys to win, but I took the Browns +3 on a hedge, just because I'm like, I am not going to be that surprised, especially with the opportunity that Myles Garrett has to break the single-season sack record. He couldn't do it in 14 games, but if he could do it in 16 games, I'd be fairly impressed that he broke the record on a, in a traditional season that most people outside of 1983 can respect. The older people that are going to say in the 70s, oh, he couldn't do it in 14 games, it's not legitimate, they had to do it in the 16. For a lot of, younger people, he would have done it in a traditional NFL season by every standard. So, I think the game is going to be ugly, it's going to be grindy, it's going to be low scoring and brutal. And I'll take Pittsburgh because I'll trust Rodgers to outplay Shedeur by a slight margin. But I'll tell Browns fans again, I'll tell Steelers fans again, don't be surprised that the Browns can pull off the win. And just for everybody out there, remember, I'm taking the Packers to win. So you probably will have the division, but I'm not being a Ravens homer here by telling you about that. I'm just being honest and giving you a, fair assessment about what's going on. So, but that's why I like Cleveland here, +3, but Pittsburgh straight up. The next game, the New Orleans Saints over the Tennessee Titans. This one comes down to me where, look, the Titans, they've played well, and Cam Ward, for the most part, played a good overall game. But let's be honest, if Gardner was healthy, I think the Chiefs could have won that game. Because I think at one point when Gardner, it was a 3-2 football game through the first half before Gardner went down. Okay, the Chiefs defense didn't really play that well. And for any Titans fan out there, shout out to Keith Bailey, another prognosticator. I am not saying that the Titans couldn't have won or still could have won even if Gardner played through. But the Titans got a huge break with Gardner Minshew going down, playing a third-string quarterback. And look, the Saints, here's the crazy thing about the Saints. The Saints, with Tyler Shugg and this team, they have built a lot of good momentum. They have won 4 of their last 6 games. And Tyler Shugg, to me, if you are looking at the rookie quarterbacks, definitively and by far, he's been the best rookie quarterback out of the entire group to me. You can have your Cam Warrens, you can have your Shadors, you can have your Jackson Darts, you can have your Brady Cooks even though people probably don't even know who that is. That's the current quarterback for the Jets, who is starting again this week because the Jets are tanking for, I guess, obvious reasons. But I genuinely believe Tyler Shugg has at least, in my opinion, if you watch Saints games, and I have, he's at least earned the right that the Saints, I do not think, need to draft a quarterback. And even if they decide to bring in another quarterback or they still haven't seen enough from Tyler Shugg, I do believe that Tyler Shugg has earned the right to be the quarterback one next year. I am not saying that he is a franchise quarterback. I am not saying that he is going to be, the next coming of Drew Brees. I am just saying that if you watch Tyler Shugg through the year and progress, he's won enough games, he's played well enough in that situation that he's earned the right to be the definitive quarterback one going into next year. And the Saints do not need to draft a quarterback. And I am so happy about that because all offseason going into this year, everybody said, or after the draft, when they drafted Tyler Shugg, and everybody laughed at him for being a 25-year-old, 26-year-old from Louisville, and they were like, oh, well, the Saints locked in their number one pick status. And I'm like, boys and girls, give the guy a chance to play. And for my money, he's been the best rookie quarterback out of the group. And I think the Saints at least have a quarterback that's earned the right to be quarterback one going into 2026. And quarterback is not a draft need. And so, so Mark Schlereth and all you guys, laugh at that. I'm happy Tyler's winning games. But that's why I'm going to take the Saints here because I just feel like, again, the Titans, Cam Ward's played, okay. He's won 2 of his last 4 games. But I just think the Saints have played better. They're healthier. Kellen Moore's a better coach than Mike McCoy at this point. And that's why I'm going to go New Orleans here. And it would be crazy because the Saints could beat the Falcons on the road. I'd probably take Atlanta. But if the Saints could go end on a 5-6 game winning streak, who would have thought before the year started the Saints could have ended up on a 5-game winning streak at the end of the year? I didn't think there were a lot of people, including me, that probably didn't think the Saints could win 5 football games. The fact that they're be on a 5-game winning streak at the end of the year is crazy in that way. So, but that's like New Orleans here -2.5, and New Orleans straight up. The next game, the Jacksonville Jaguars over the Indianapolis Colts. This one is just fairly easy. The Colts secondary's banged up to you-know-what. It's been awful. They got shredded by Brock Purdy on Monday. It's a short week. Phillip Rivers played okay. I thought he had a good first half, and he hasn't looked awful. But I think the biggest thing that I want to take away, look, Jacksonville, then the biggest surprise, let me do it right here. The Duval man, Liam Cohen, probably would get my vote for Coach of the Year at this point. Because if you told me the Jags after the, Duval man would have won 11 games with Trevor Lawrence pretty much looking through the first half of the year, looking like he was getting carried by his team. And then, even though, again, over the last several weeks, Trevor Lawrence has shown that he at least can have the ability to elevate his game into another gear, which is huge. But I think for, this Jacksonville Indy game, I think, the Colts have played admirable. And again, Daniel Jones, obviously that injury, derailed their season. But I just think, again, the Jags are healthier. They have the number 1 rush defense in the NFL. They've caused second most turnovers. They're playing, with a lot of confidence, a lot of ability. And I just think for the Colts, at the end of the year, they need to clean the entire house and fire Shane Steichen and fire Chris Ballard because this year has been, just an absolute train wreck. And the biggest criticism that you could give Carly Gordon, new owner, is 2 things. 1, the fact that the Colts basically let Daniel Jones play when he had a fractured fibula in his other knee. And then I say, well, he tore his other Achilles. That's fair. But I think Jacksonville... And then the other thing is the Sauce trade. Because now the Colts are in a situation where they are not going to be able to get a quarterback at all. Because they have 2 first-round picks for a guy that hasn't been really able to play. And that really hasn't, And I think the Colts are in a terrible situation for years moving forward because of that trade. So that's like Jacksonville -6.5 and Jacksonville straight up. The next couple games, these two will be fairly quick. Tampa Bay over Miami. Miami, look, they gave up on Tua. Tua time's over. And I understand it in the ability sense that, Tua's smaller. He hasn't really been able to play well. He made some tough decisions. He made a terrible pick against Pittsburgh. But it's also the Dolphins in the cold. Like, Tua's never been a good under 40-degree quarterback. I don't think he's ever won a game where it's been under 40 degrees when kickoff starts. And Quinn Ewers, for the most part, he had a couple nice moments. Achane really kind of ran in the beginning, but then he drew a couple terrible picks. Their defense couldn't stop anything. And I just think that's the reason. Like, if Miami had, Tua, I might argue Miami could beat Tampa. Because Tampa's collapsed to where they were after, like, the Niners game and the Saints game, where you thought, Tampa, okay, here comes Baker and the Bucs. They could, make a lot of noise. And I thought at the beginning of the year, and as I said, I still think with the injuries they could have been, I thought they had the number one offense in the entire NFL. The best overall offense in the entire NFL. But obviously that's proven that doesn't matter. And I think Tampa's better just because I feel like they're still playing for something. And I think Miami, they know how bad they are. And Quinn, I just think in his second start, I don't think he's going to get that much better. And I think that's why Tampa wins. But Tampa's season overall has just been a very disappointing and sad run. Though I would acknowledge to everybody, here's the key thing. There are people wanting to fire Todd Bowles. And I would say that is not fair for this year. But because of this collapse that's imminent or almost there, I think the Bucs need to seriously consider after 2026, depending on what happens, the Bucs may need to consider the reset to both Todd and Baker Mayfield, because Baker's play over the last several weeks hasn't been great either. And I just feel like with Baker, and you can call me a Baker hater or not or whatever, if you pay Baker the $50+ million, you have basically kneecapped your team, and you are not winning a Super Bowl with Baker Mayfield at quarterback if you do that. And if the Bucs can't improve or get a playoff win or show progress, and they go 9-8 or they can't move forward, I genuinely will consider, I'm like, you don't re-sign Baker, you let go of Todd, and you start over, and you may even fire Jason Light because of, what's happened. But I think that is where I'm with the Bucs. Again, I think they win because the Dolphins just have been that inept with Quinn, and they're not going to move, differently from that. But I like Tampa here just because, they're getting healthier, they're getting their line back, and I think Baker's going to play better than Quinn, and they should be able to move the ball enough. But Tampa's future after 2026, they really seriously need to consider completely doing a full reset and moving forward, and that would include firing Jason Light for this collapse or for this movement as well. So that's like Tampa Bay here, -5.5. Tampa Bay straight up. The next game, New England over the Jets. New England's routinely own the Jets. The Jets are playing a third-string quarterback intentionally. They're tanking. They sacked Garrett Wilson for the year. The only crazy thing about I would say about this game is the Jets are 2 games away against the Bills and against the Patriots. If Josh Allen or Drake May do not throw a pick to them, they will be the first team in NFL history to not record an interception the entire year, which is a mind-boggling but Jet-appropriate stat for the year. But again, New England here, they're coming off a big win. And you could say maybe they fall into a trap. It's the Jets. They're not going to. Brady Cook's playing. Brady Cook's been mostly bad. And the Jets just will continue to be miserable. And it's just kind of amazing that somehow the Jets, amazingly, won 3 games off ineptitude from the Falcons, the Browns, and the Bengals. Because if you watch the Jets for the most part, this should be an 0-17 football team. And amazingly, they got 3 wins, and probably Woody feels confident enough to, move forward. But against this Pats team, no chance. So that's like New England here, -13.5, New England straight up. The next game, Seattle over Carolina. This game to me is a weird one because I think this is very interesting enough, like the Rams. This could be a trap for Seattle. They're coming off their first 16-point fourth quarter comeback in franchise history. They were 0-155 going into the game with that 16-point deficit. And Sam Darnold had his crown jewel victory and crown jewel game, in my opinion. That was the best game Sam Darnold, or in that situation, that stretch of football, was the biggest and clutch he's played in his life. Again, I think Mike McDonald made an idiotic comment because he said, what big moment, and this was a couple days ago, what big moment, tell me a game where Sam Darnold didn't come through. Let's talk about Week 18 last year. Mike, we can show you two games. Week 18 last year against the Lions and the game against the Rams, or even this year where you could say, okay, you were playing the Rams the first time, and he had 4 turnovers and cost you a game where in the second half the Rams didn't even get the midfield. So talk about big games and failing. Sam Darnold has had plenty of them in the last year or in the last 12 months. So don't lie to us, or don't make us go to the tape and say, show us a game where Sam Darnold didn't, come up big. It's like, no, he's come up small plenty of times. But that's beside the point. I just think Seattle, they understand what's at stake because essentially they know they can knock out the Rams to a wild card spot if they beat the Panthers. And again, I think the Seahawks, I think Sam, you could argue they might lull themselves into a sleep. I don't know. But I think Seattle's just fundamentally better at every position. The Panthers, the Panthers are such an awkward team because, they're the team that every time you bet on them, they lose, and every time you doubt them, they win. So, like I said, I won't be surprised if Carolina wins this game because that's been Carolina's MO this year. But I'm taking Seattle here based on, healthier team, better team, stronger defense. The only issue that I can see happening is, can the Panthers defense with their secondary limit Sam Darnold because they haven't really able to run the ball that effectively. Though I know Kenneth Walker got a big 50+ yard touchdown the other day. So this is this is kind of a big game just for positioning for both teams. One in the division, one for the 1 seed. But just from what I've seen out of Seattle through their consistent play, Mike's a better coach than Dave is, and I just trust Seattle. And again, Seattle's won a lot of games on the East Coast recently. So they've won even in the Pete Carroll a lot of East Coast games. So I'm not worried about the time switch there. But I'll take the Seahawks here just for all those factors. So that's like Seattle -7 and Seattle straight up. The next game, in the game where you lose, the Raiders over the Giants. I'm going to take the Raiders, even though I know they just sat Brock Bowers. I'm taking the Raiders based on the Giants' ineptitude. Like the Giants showed with Mike Kafka, and I know the Raiders' defense is not the Vikings' defense, so maybe he'll let it rip a bit more. But I saw enough out of Geno and Genti and the Raiders that after that game against the Eagles, that they're still trying to win. Or Pete Carroll did not have, Pete Carroll did not take their entire soul from them, and they don't care. The Giants just were so bad. And look, they don't have Kayvon Thibodeau. They have other injuries, and just I'll take Geno to beat Dart, like Geno beat Cam earlier in the year. And I think, again, like I said, I think for the Raiders it's going to be the worst thing. But they're at home. The Giants just kind of lifeless or sad, and I think Geno, if he just limits the mistakes, Jackson's going to run himself into some sacks. He's going to try, and I trust the Raiders to grind out a win in the saddest way possible that will give the Giants the opportunity to secure the number 1 pick. And I would tell everybody this: Jackson Dart should be replaced by Fernando Mendoza if the New York Giants are smart. I do not believe in Jackson Dart as a long-term franchise quarterback. And I think the Giants need to move on with Fernando Mendoza moving forward. So that's like Las Vegas Raiders here, -1.5 in Las Vegas straight up. And in the final 3 games, the Philadelphia Eagles over the Buffalo Bills. I'm going to take the Philadelphia Eagles here for one sole reason. It's the Eagles' running attack against one of the worst run defenses in the NFL. The Bills, if the Eagles commit to the run with Jalen and Saquon, they should be able to win this game against Buffalo. Josh Allen, the last time they played each other, it was the great game where Jalen won on the walk-off. It's going to be in Buffalo, so it's going to be cold. There's going to be snow. I actually know some friends of mine that are going up to Buffalo this weekend for this game. It's going to be a lot of fun. And look, I know Josh has been playing better, but also he's playing one of the better defenses. And Josh, against some of the better defense in the league this year, has shown to be turnover prone. I think Josh is going to throw or have 1 or 2 turnovers. They're going to shift the momentum to the Eagles. And if the Eagles will at least commit to the run and Jalen's, conservative brand of football in this type of game, I think the Eagles grind out this win. If it's going to go down to a shootout or the improv play, Josh and the Bills will win this game, and I wouldn't be that surprised. But knowing how bad the Bills' run defense is, knowing the injuries they have at other points, knowing the limited receiving weapons they have, going up against that secondary, I think the Eagles can grind out a win in Buffalo to improve to 11-5 themselves and still have hope for the 2 seed alive moving forward. So that's why I like Philadelphia here, +1. Philadelphia straight up. The next game, the Chicago Bears over the San Francisco 49ers. I'm going to take Chicago here based on health. This is about, to me, the Bears being healthier than the Niners. You can argue the coaching. Kyle's been there. He's done that. They're at home. Christian McCaffrey's been an absolute beast. I don't think Christian McCaffrey's going to be that impactful. And I get the experience that Brock Purdy's been playing. But I know I've seen the Bears enough time. Their offensive line's legit. The Bears' defense is one of the better secondaries in the league. Nashawn Wright, who I didn't think made the Pro Bowl, that was an all-time snub because he's had a fantastic and sensational year for the Bears, even though shout out to Kevin Byard for making his 4th Pro Bowl. But in this game, I'm just going with health in the offensive line, and that's Chicago Bears. Could the Niners win this game? Absolutely. It's Purdy. It's a home game. It's, the Niners can use this moment as nobody's respected us the entire year. We've been just hiding in the shadows with our other division rivals getting more credit. And if they beat the Bears, then it's okay, the Niners have an amazing opportunity. If they sweep the Seahawks, the Niners will be the number 1 seed, and nobody would have thought they could have been the 1 seed as this year has gone on. But I'm going to take Chicago here. They're healthier. Their secondary is playing a little bit better. And I'll trust that help with their run game, limiting the possessions Brock Purdy has, will be the difference in the Bears' victory. That's why Chicago here +3 and Chicago straight up. And lastly, the Los Angeles Rams over the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons, they've been spunky and competitive over the last few weeks with Kirk Cousins. They got the comeback win against Tampa. C.J. Henderson with the big pick last week against Arizona. Bijan's been running it well. But they've also played the Cardinals. They've also played the Bucks. They've also played the Saints. Their competition hasn't been great. And, they feel better about themselves through their 4-game stretch. From when they played Seattle and Atlanta, Seattle rolled them 37-9. With the Rams offense and knowing what they know and knowing the confidence they have and the anger they have, I'm expecting a very similar outcome on Monday night in Atlanta with the Rams coming into the building, just like the Seattle did a couple weeks ago. So, and again, could the Falcons be maybe competitive? Sure, if Kirk Cousins can play a little bit better, but the Rams, I think, defensive line will get to Kirk Cousins with the Pro Bowlers they have, and I think the Rams comfortably get a win, and they comfortably get to beat Arizona. So if the Bears win against the Niners, if I'm right, now the Rams have the opportunity to win the NFC West and get the 1 seed themselves, which is insane. So that's the Los Angeles Rams here -8 and the Los Angeles Rams straight up. But that is it. So those are my picks for this week. Like, comment, rate, and subscribe. Please check out the NFL YouTube Prognosticators page to see other great prognosticators like Andrew Warren, Half Moon's Picks, Bridgewater's Finest, and all the other guys and gals that make predictions like I do every single week during the football season. And once again, like I said, for the next 2 weeks, expect the videos to come out sometime on Monday. So Monday the 29th, and then Monday, January 5th. Those 2 videos will likely come out for Week 18 and the Wild Card round. So that is it. So until next week, everyone, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and Happy Boxing Day to all Canadians out there. I hope everyone has a great time, enjoying time with their family, getting through the football if you want to watch it on Christmas Day. It's not great football. I even as a fanatic, watch the NBA games. They'll be a better product. But until next week, everyone, this is Matthew Fanatic signing off. Until then, everyone, so long.